Welcome to The Curiosity Solution. I'm your host, Beverly Beal. Join us as we explore the science of curiosity, share stories of people who've used curiosity to improve their lives, and maybe inspire some aha moments along the way. Welcome to this wonderful next episode with Patti DeNucci. Thank you so much for being here with us, Patti.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure, Beverly.
So Patti DeNucci is someone I saw speak at a conference a while back, and she's a brilliant author. And my gosh, I mean, you're an author, you're a coach. Let me see, I'm looking at blogger, speaker, facilitator. I mean, that's just the top line of what this wonderful woman does. Um, Patty, I'd love to find out though, how did you get into the business of being a communication educator?
That's a great question. Um, I ended up I ended up getting a clothing, textile, and design degree in college. Okay, I lean very much towards art and writing. I have a minor in art and write art and writing and people. You know, having parties, connecting with them have always been my little trifecta of things that I do in my sleep. I mean, I literally talk and I've been told I'm a big talker in my sleep. I never stop. And when I got out of college, I moved to Texas. I followed my fiance and husband number one to Texas. That's where he got hired
Where did
after
you start?
school.
Where did you start?
I grew up in northern Minnesota and went to school in Wisconsin.
Okay. Okay.
So I did know that I wanted to move south. I was very tired of the cold, dark, long winters up there. And I knew I wanted to move south. Texas was the obvious choice back. We're talking the early 80s. It's been a long time. But I ended up, instead of finding a fabulous retail career or, I don't know, Texas isn't really the fashion capital, although there are some great fashion companies and, design programs here at the university. But I ended up working in the communications department of a scientific instrumentation company, which was fine. I could do that job in my sleep. And then shortly after that, I got hired by a woman starting a marketing communications company that would serve the high-tech industry, which was just emerging. And I think I was
Wow.
most attracted to her because I laid out everything I'd done, everything I knew how to do. And I said, "Am I a fit for you?" And she said, "Absolutely, you're in." So I worked for her for 7 years doing ad campaigns, PR campaigns. I wrote about touchscreens when people weren't quite sure what we were going to do with them, which is shocking. And I
That's
wrote
so
about
cool.
what they now call 3D printing. Like I just read that they're now letting people move into homes in East Austin that have been built through 3D printing. We used to call
Never
it
yet.
3D modeling, I guess is what we called it back then. But I've written about a lot of really techie stuff, but then I went out on my own in 1989 and started doing more marketing communications for all kinds of companies. And from there, I started a freelance talent bureau to take on the overflow of the business that, I was attracting the business, but I couldn't do all the business. I couldn't handle all of it.
Mhm.
So I started, floating it off to different designers and writers and all of that. And that got me really networking a lot more than I had been. I was networking. When I started my own company, I started networking because that's the way you get clients. But then when I had the talent bureau, I had to just really ramp that up. And I think that led into me writing The Intentional Networker, which is my first book. People kept asking me to come speak about networking. They kept asking me to coffee so that they could, ask me about what kind of networking I did and what were my techniques. And it just dawned on me, these questions, when people ask you the same questions over and over again, I would say that's time to write a book or do something, open a consulting practice. So one book led to my professional speaking career, because if you're going to have a book, you might as well go out on the road and promote it. Plus you've become an
Yeah.
expert, so now people will pay you. And then the second book came along because I was still getting more questions. So my second book is called More Than Just Talk, and that's the conversation book. It's about having better conversations, more of the conversations you want to be having and fewer of the ones you don't, which seems to get people's eyebrows going up. Like, ooh, that sounds intriguing. So
I
I'm
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go
I,
ahead. Go ahead.
I, wa-
I've interrupted you.
no, no, I was just going to say I'm still speaking. I'm excited that this new book finally came out in February of 2023, and really excited about looking into 2024. Getting a lot of interest in going in and doing some consulting to companies that have client-facing employees that are having a hard time with the interpersonal communication.
It
Yeah,
makes
so
complete
I don't
sense to
know.
me. Yeah, it makes
It's just a
complete
path. Yeah, it's just a
yeah,
path.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it makes complete sense to me that you went from essentially interface being the translator for
Mhm.
these technical type devices and concepts and communicating it in such a way that the layperson could understand and get enthusiastic about
Mhm.
to now taking the same type of facilitation towards helping people trying to communicate like I can communicate now, um, communicate their ideas and having this,
Mhm.
having the connection with someone else. So many times the intention of the conversation gets lost in translation.
Oh
Um,
boy, does it ever.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
before we started recording, we started, talking a little bit about the energy of conversations, and I'd love to dive right into that
Mm.
because that's not exactly on my list of things to cover, but that is such a juicy, juicy topic. So
Yeah, and, you know, and it
what tell
impacts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it impacts us. I mean, do you ever walk into a house or, like, especially an older house? We're big travelers, and we're going back over to Paris in April, and, um, I love walking into a house. I like walking into my own house and thinking of all the conversations that took place here. Mostly, I like to focus on the good ones. There've been some arguments, there've been some dramatic things, here and there, but the energy resonates. But when I meet somebody, and as we were talking about before we went on the air, I don't know if this is something that's just in my being, if it's a natural born talent, or if it's something I've acquired. Maybe it's a combination of both. I think I've had it, and I honed it and have polished it, and I'm still polishing it. But I can pick up on people's energy, sometimes before they say a word, and sometimes while they're talking. And some people make me so comfortable, and other people at any given moment, that it can change from moment to moment. I'm thinking, I'm at a cocktail party, I'm having a conversation that's I'm feeling uncomfortable for whatever reason, and I'm going to go mingle. I'm going to go move on to somebody else and see if
Suddenly your
things.
drink needs to be refreshed.
Yes, I have to go refresh my drink. Or, hey, I see my good friend over there. I promised her I would, spend some time with her tonight, or have to use the ladies' room, or
That's
whatever the
always a good
excuse
one
is.
unless they say,
Yeah,
"Oh, I'll go with you." And you're like,
yeah, that's not what I meant. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what some people struggle with, is they feel like once they're in a conversation, they feel like they're stuck there. And one of the big things that I try to share with people is liberate yourself from that idea, and just know that if you're not enjoying the conversation, either change it in some way with a conversation shifting question or comment, or excuse yourself graciously and walk away and go find somebody else to talk to.
Mhm.
I think it's the
You know
feeling trapped that
Yeah.
some people struggle
Oh,
with.
for many years, I felt unable to say no. I felt that, I had this kind of internal good girl program that said
Mm,
that I have to take whatever is given.
mhm.
I My job was to make people feel comfortable, and that it's like it was my job, not their job to
Yeah.
adapt.
Sure.
You know, college years were a little challenging at times. But I as I got older, you start to understand that no is and excuse me is perfectly acceptable.
Mhm.
But what you're describing about walking into an old home, and thinking about the conversations, and
Right.
how you're, the when you are talking with somebody that you could pick up on their energy. You've just described the attributes of there's well two major terms that go around with that. Either that's the highly sensitive person, the HSP,
Mhm.
or there's another one that has become is also pretty common now, the energy empath.
Yep, I'm
The
probably both of those. I've heard of both of those, and
Yeah.
yeah, that could be me. That could be me. My mother always I was the last of 4 girls, the youngest, and my mother always called me the peacemaker. I'm the one
Yep.
that, like, I'm not accelerating this argument. I'm gonna try to, we're gonna try to tone this down because it's kind of upsetting. Not that I don't have feelings, and I have my own anger and my own issues that I have to deal with, but I think what I think is interesting is, do people, like, when they go to a networking event or a gathering, social gathering, or a meeting or a conference, do they stop and think about, or even journal about, what kind of energy am I bringing to this event today? I mean, I was even thinking, I was just finishing my bookkeeping for the year, and I didn't like the final number for the year, and I thought, "Uh-oh, is that going to impact my conversation with Beverly?" It's not. It's fine. It's all good. I've had a wonderful year. But are we thinking about how we're showing up in the world, in this world that we're
Yeah.
in?
Well, I would hope so. Again, I think there certainly are times when we all are kind of oblivious. That doesn't make us bad people. That just makes
No.
us having those momentary lapses of awareness. I
Mhm.
know one of the big, the buzzword, especially in certain circles, is being woke.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, that term simply means being aware of, again, how are you showing up?
Mhm.
What is the history of the group that I'm showing up in? How has the group been represented in the past? And again, what of
Mhm.
those things, how can I improve things? Now,
Mhm.
so when you're talking about, you come into a space and doing anytime I'm playing around with a lot of numbers, sometimes it just annoys me because I like nuance. I like gray. Numbers are very black and white.
Thank you. I agree with you on that.
Um, but yeah, those kind of things, especially because that then ties in, they can tie in very much with the money story. And
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
have money
Yeah.
stories. And again, you're talking about, I'm the youngest of 8 children. So, we have
Oh,
that youngest thing going. Um, and
mm,
yeah, I also was, I think that I internalized being, like they said, the peacemaker,
mhm.
from in utero, because I was a surprise pregnancy. My mom
Probably me
admitted.
too. Ah.
I mean, there's 3.5 years between me and my twin brothers. Love
Oh,
them. My
wow.
mom, I mean, again, and my next sister in line was 18 months older than them. So my mom was tired.
Yeah, oh,
She was
yeah.
praying that I was menopause.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, well, and we probably came along and became the joy of their lives, you know? I'm pretty
Well,
sure my parents are pretty proud of me. But
you
isn't
know
that
what? I was
interesting, though? It's just
Yeah,
so interesting, when you talk about the whole woke thing, and you talk about,
yeah.
people talk about DEIB and all that.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna say it's my answer. My take on that is, there's a couple of things going on in the world right now. One, people are wanting to save the planet, which I think is awesome. We do have to have this planet to live on. I'm a big nature lover. I recycle like crazy. I, all my Christmas cards this year were on recycled paper, and I created art on Amazon packaging. Anyway, you'd have to see it to believe it. Anyway, I'm all about these great things that we're trying to do in the world, but I'm trying to encourage people to start with the very basics of, one, acknowledging our fellow humans. When you're out and about, ac- acknowledge anybody within a few feet of you, as long as it doesn't seem awkward or weird or demented in any way. Like, you don't want to be Elf, Buddy the Elf, running around New York City telling everybody Merry Christmas. You don't want to be that person. But I really have been observing how often we miss opportunities to greet somebody, to look somebody in the eye, to say thank you, to say excuse me. Um, when I'm in the gym and I have to move from one piece of equipment to another, and I'm going to be in, getting in somebody's way or getting a little too close, I say excuse me, and I notice how often people don't say that. So to me, it's the tiny human niceties that suddenly can shift somebody's day. Like, I was at the dry cleaners today, and this poor woman, she works on her feet 12 hours every day. She's younger than I am. She looks older than I am. She's tired. She really wants to retire. But I tell you what, she loves her customers. And, I said that we're grateful that you love us because you have every reason to be cranky and ornery. And my job when I come in here is to at least say good morning to you and ask how you're doing. And she says, a lot of people do that, but a lot don't. So,
Yeah. Well, and um I still remember there was one woman I used to work with way back in the day when I worked for Procter and Gamble. Um, she was another rep for another division, and whenever she was in town, we'd get together and we'd go out to lunch or go out to dinner. And I was always shocked at how rude she was to
oh,
the servers or
it's
to the
so sad.
valet, or it's like,
Mhm.
anybody that was helping us. She would always find fault, and I
Mm.
never quite understood that until later. Again, this was way before I had any awareness of being an empath, or of, how you project your stuff onto other people.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until later that I was able to go back and look and see just how miserable she was internally.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
whenever yeah, and so whenever I see people who are being grumpy like that, or they are being, just n toots, as my
Yeah.
mama used to say,
Yeah.
uh, I it's not that I'm trying to excuse them, but I am curious about, wow, what else is going on in their world
Mhm.
that makes them feel like it's okay to dehumanize someone. And that's the thing that, again,
Mm.
coming back to the energy of conversations and just communication in general, um, you really can't have a conversation with someone that you don't feel is human. And I
Oh,
feel like
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been one of the biggest challenges that we've had is that, there are camps that have deemed the other side
Mhm.
as less than. And,
Mhm.
it's part of the reason why I think it's even more important to have good communication and good conversations. So when you have, like the books that you have, referenced, The Intentional Networker and More Than Just Talk, how much of those do you think, how much of the stuff that you've written about in there would be applicable for helping to bridge that gap, to see the other
Hmm.
person as someone worthy of listening to?
I think both books touch on that because when you said we have different factions, different sides, politically, environmentally, pick a topic and people, there's a
Mhm.
side to be on. I think it's even more grassroots than that. Um, I follow the work of a woman named Ruth Whitman, and people say it's the pandemic that have made us so lonely and isolated. I think that's a big thing I talk about is we've become so isolated. Like, did you know that Austin ranks as one of the top loneliest towns in the United States?
Surprised me. I mean,
Isn't that
again,
surprising?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
because so much of the economy here now has become, technology
Yes.
oriented, and
Yes. And
so there's
so
all this screen time.
right. So people are over the last it's not just the pandemic, although that did get it exponentially, fired up. But over the last 20 years we've become more dependent on technology. We've become more addicted to technology. We have more options to do more things with our technology. Um, and I think it doesn't even matter what side you're on. And it does matter. I'm going to say it does matter. And we need to certainly find middle ground on all that. But I think we have just decided that being alone is better than being with other people. Period. And I know people. I have a neighbor that lives across the street. really nice guy. He just spends a lot of time alone. And I see over and over again on Instagram accounts that say, let's normalize, spending the evening with our dog and a glass of wine. And I'm all about that kind of thing. I love some time alone. I don't like all my time alone. Spending time alone too much, like repeatedly, is actually horrible for our health, our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health. Um, and it's truly, there's a study out of Harvard that says that over the last 85 years, they followed people, and it's the quality of our relationships. It's the quality of our conversations, even with perfect strangers, that will determine our health, our vibrancy as we get older. And I'm getting up in there, and I have plans to be around for the next 30 plus years, God willing. But I know I can't do it alone. So,
That's one of the reasons why I've also read that women tend to live longer than men because we do tend to be more
mhm,
focused on building communities, which of course requires
right,
communication. And that's
right.
part of the reason too why married men tend to live longer than unmarried men
Mhm.
because the wife makes them talk.
Right, unless in the case of my family, my dad was more social, and he outlived my mother by, probably 6 or 7 years.
Oh wow.
She was more private. She was lovely, she was gracious, but she was more private. And I can look at all kinds of different couples, older couples, some of my friends' parents, and it was the one that was more social that generally
Hmm.
lived longer and was happier.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. This is such interest. I love this work that I'm in because the more I dive into it, whether it's networking, and my intentional networker book was more about let's network better, not more, because networking takes time. So let's do it
It does.
well, and let's go to the events and have the coffees that are going to be, either if they're not at least energizing and enjoyable, what are they doing? Are we having a mutual beneficial relationship, or is it one-sided? Either way. And then the conversation piece really dove more into our humanness of conversation.
I love that. I'm a big networker. We've obviously been networking together now
Yeah.
um, for a while, and I know too that there are times when I can just get peopled out.
Oh, yeah.
You talked about this loneliness, not the pandemic, but that we had this,
Yeah.
um,
It's a
that people
trend.
were
It's a
lonely.
trend. And it's been
'Cause
going on for 20 plus years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there was a book that our book club read. It's called Factfulness. Hans
Mm,
Rowling is the Rosling Rowling. Anyway, it's called Factfulness.
okay.
I actually just referred it to my siblings because in that book, which was written, I think, it's been a while. I can't remember now when it was written, but it's been at least 15 years,
I'm writing it
I
down.
believe. Yes. Um, and it in there talked about um, the difference between the emotional perception and the actual facts.
Mm.
And and so, when you talk and how and it really illustrated just actually how much better things have gotten
Oh, yeah.
over the decades,
Mhm.
and using very specific metrics.
Mhm.
But again, you would think, "Oh, wait a minute. No, everything's going to hell in a handbasket if you listen to certain
Yeah.
people."
Oh,
Um,
sure.
you know, and so, for me, that's where the curiosity of perception comes in,
Oh,
the curiosity piece of
yeah.
what is feeding that need for things to be terrible? What is feeding the need to because again,
Oh,
if you're coming into a conversation with
yeah.
this idea that, the sky is falling,
Mhm, mhm,
you're not going to come across as
mhm.
a very happy, welcoming,
Yeah.
open-minded person who's going to
Yes.
energize your communication partner.
Yes.
So
Oh my
that's
goodness.
where I
I have so
that's
much
where
to
I
say
look at
about that.
things. Oh my
Well,
god. Well, let's
I
go.
will say
Let's go.
there's another great book out there. I have not read it, but my boyfriend has. He's a very logical guy. Very well, you met him. He's a sweetheart too. Another book is called The Rational Optimist. That's another
Ooh.
great book. It's written by a
Right.
British gentleman. But anyway, but when you talk about curiosity and perception, oh my gosh, those are just such great words that my neurons are just flaring like crazy. I think some of it is the media, the constant drumbeat of the media wanting us to be transfixed with the drama of what's going on in the world. And we have a negativity bias. That's probably no big news to you. We have a negativity bias. If something's dangerous or unpleasant or potentially threatening, we're going to, we're going to remember that, and we're going to share it with everybody, and we're going to be transfixed with that information. Okay. So you talk about, are things better now than they were? Oh my gosh. Think about the era my parents grew up in. My parents would be 105 right now. They grew up in they were born in 1918. They grew up in the Depression during World War II, um, through the Russian missile crisis. I mean, I'm also a big history buff. Our world has always had chaos, always.
Hmm.
And it's a matter of what chaos is in my sphere right now. Can I change this? Can I deal with this? Is this something that impacts me right now? I read the headlines in the morning, and I like to know what's going on in the world. I like to feel educated and all that. And I like to know, I mean, I want to be well read. But once I'm done, I am done for the day, because you can make yourself completely crazy. You could read the paper or the headlines and just take your blood pressure, and watch it just go up. And it's designed, I don't know why we're so addicted to that. But people who bring that into a conversation, um, and I've experienced that. Regularly, and there's a name for that. It's not a very nice name. It's called the turd in the punch bowl, and it's something that totally besmirches the energy of the room. Um, yeah. So uh, at any
That
given
is a
networking of
very, very visceral
the turd in the
phrase.
punch bowl,
The
I did not
turd of the
make that
punch
up.
bowl.
The turd in the punch bowl, and ew, your reaction to that is, oh, that's horrible. But that's what the person who suddenly, they're in a circle of people and everybody's talking about whatever, Christmas, or, what are you doing for spring break, or what are your summer plans, or what are this, that, and that person makes a comment that you can just feel the energy just go, ew. I'm
Uh,
laughing because
Patty,
it's
have
just so
you met my
sad.
siblings? I swear, I
Yeah.
have one sibling that we could be having just a grand old conversation, because we all
Mhm.
have a sibling chat, group
Yeah.
text. And I have well, there's a couple of them that depends on the day, and what
Yeah.
level of irritation they have. We could be talking about the weather, about the pretty clouds, about what the nieces and nephews are doing, and they'll throw in some kind of political,
Yeah.
Molotov
Thing.
cocktail, and I'm like, "Really?
Yeah. Yes,
How
that's a
how
great
does?"
example. That's a great description. It's just like, "Pew!" It's just a firecracker that goes right into m
Yeah.
and, I know I've been guilty of it. Gosh, the more I do this work, the more I catch myself doing things or saying something or not saying something that I look back on and go, "Ouch, Patty. What was that all about?" And I think, again, it goes back to what's going on in your own mind.
Mhm.
What's swirling around, and what are you feeding your mind? I mean, as you well know, our diet isn't just what we eat. It's the books we read, it's the shows we watch, it's um, the news that we allow to filter into our head. It's, you're a Wall Street Journal person, or are you a New York Times person? Because either side will have something that'll get your blood pressure going. But what, how are we preparing ourselves when we're around other people? Um,
Mhm.
I think when we walk into a room, I know you're all about rooms and spaces. So how are we either enhancing the space or contaminating the space?
Right. Well, you talked about, the what we're watching,
Mhm.
what kind of media are we consuming? That's actually one of the reasons, a big reason why TVs in bedrooms are such bad ideas. Having any
Mm,
device in the bedroom is
mm,
a bad idea, because if you think
yeah.
about it, that screen becomes it becomes another person, another entity, and it can
Mhm.
become a relationship substitute. Your phone or
Yeah,
your tablet can do
yeah.
the same thing.
It's
I
also a
can't believe.
portal. It's a portal into what's going on out there, where your bedroom should be your home should be your
Right,
sanctuary.
right. So
I
whatever
know
you're
it
watching. comes into
Yeah,
your room. So do you really want
whatever
that
you
gunk on your floor? No.
yeah, what do you wanna be watching? You said something earlier too about perception.
Mhm.
You said a bunch of words, curiosity, all those words. Yeah, this is fun. I love your vocabulary, Beverly.
Thank
Um,
you.
so you mentioned perception. I wanna go back to that for just a minute and talk about how, I said earlier, I can pick up on somebody's energy or I can pick up on who I think they are. And, there's the famous quote by Maya Angelou that says, whatever people, how does that go? How
When
does it go?
people
It's
show you who
show
they
you
are,
who they
believe
are,
them.
believe them. Okay. So I wanted to go back to that because sometimes I make a snap judgment, and I think we all do. And I think we've all been taught that people will make snap judgments about us. So present yourself well, do all these things that we're talking about. I know I have been wrong. I have been wrong. Either I've thought, oh, what a nice person, and they turned out to be, a borderline psychopath who, got their clutches in me and, it was hard to extract them out of my life. Or I thought, oh, I don't really like that person. They don't look very happy. They don't look like they're a good person. And I've been wrong. I've been wrong because they were just going through something bad at the time. So I want to talk about, can we talk about that for a minute?
Of
About
course.
how, like I know you do a lot of work changing the energy of the room, shifting the energy of the room. I think sometimes we have the opportunity to shift either our energy or find a way to shift someone we're in conversation with out of or find the truth about their energy. Like, is this just a temporary thing right now because you had nearly had a car wreck on the way over here? Or is this you, that how you operate in the world? That's a tricky one, I think. It's worth exploring though.
Absolutely. The challenge with that sometimes is I think, you and I, it sounds like, have you done the Enneagram?
Yes,
Are you
am I a 7 or I think I'm a 7. I'm the creative all over the place.
okay,
I'm
so that would be
with a
7.
2 when I want to be the helper, which would be bossy Patty. Be bossy Patty.
So yeah, I actually had been typed as a 7, but then when I started studying it more, it's like, "Oh, no, I'm a 9." But I'm a
Oh,
healthy 9. I am with
okay.
it with a strong 8 wing, so
Mhm.
I have gotten more comfortable with confrontation these
Mhm.
days, but I still don't enjoy it, although
No.
sometimes it really is fun to, especially if somebody's being a toot.
Oh
Helping
yeah.
them to see, but, confronting them in such a way that it's not in a mean-spirited way, it is
Mhm.
a way of getting to that nugget, are you, you know,
Yeah.
talk to me about help me understand how you are coming at this problem or how are you
Mhm.
coming at this conversation because it could be that you just don't have the same baseline. If
Mhm.
you aren't coming at things from a shared vocabulary, you talked about my
Mhm.
vocabulary before, um, then without having that shared set of words, it's difficult to communicate. So you do need to find a Rosetta Stone if
Right.
necessary for certain groups to
Yes.
find their way
Yeah,
to
help
that
me
understanding.
understand. You said something,
Yeah,
help me understand. Tell me why you feel that. Tell me how you see it that way. How do you
yeah.
mean? Those are great words. And my conversation book is full of those little techniques
Hmm.
that I have to remember to go back to. I mean, this is not something you learn to do overnight. But I want to go back to you. I mean, you're tall in stature. You have a very beautiful presence, and I mean that sincerely. When you say you're a 9, and I'm not as familiar with what they all are because I had the file out the other day just because I was trying to remember what I was. But you seem like a truth teller, that you have to be a truth teller in your work so that you can help make the changes that people desire you to make. You have to point
So
things out to people.
yeah, so as a 9, the 3 energy comes out more
Mhm.
when I am in that, more grounded place. So that's where
Oh,
that
love
achiever
that.
comes in because I do like that.
Mhm.
But that 8 wing is what allows me to be more of the truth teller.
Oh,
And
what you say?
there are there I again, I have had to work very hard to not be as blunt
Mhm.
and direct as
Mhm.
I would kind of like to be.
Mhm. Me
Um,
too.
well,
Menopause
because
does that to us too, I think. I think suddenly well, it's either age and experience or menopause, the shifting of the hormones, with a little less estrogen, a little more, you know, I think there's a certain point in our lives when we realize we know an answer, or we think we know the answer, or we think we know an answer, and we want to get right to it. Interestingly, one of the pieces of information I found in my book was the smarter and more successful we are, the worse we are at listening. First graders are often better listeners than we successful grown-ups, which that blew my hair back when I read that. And of course, it's in my conversation book. But I think it's just interesting. How do we how can we communicate more gently? It's a dilemma for me sometimes, because I'm sometimes in too much of a hurry. But how can we communicate more gently and still be strong and powerful and hold up our boundaries? It's an interesting thing that we're constantly on this sliding scale of, do I have to be more blunt and direct right now, or do I have to be a little more down the compassionate side, where we're going to coat this in a nice chewy marshmallow that's fluffy and sweet? And will they still get the point if we do that? Or is there something in the middle?
I was say, or do we just shove the medicine into the strawberry and say, "Take it"? That's what my daughter does to her dog. Patty, you just muted.
Better? Hello?
Yeah, now I
Oh,
can
my
hear
back.
you. I got so
I got
excited. It's like,
excited. I hit a button. Anyway, yeah, this is a fun conversation. You can tell I'm getting all wired up about this. Um,
I
this
knew
is
it
just
would be.
something that we have to keep working on. And, I hear from people who are they're introverts, extroverts. The introverts, their battery is charged with the alone time, with the creative time.
Mm.
Extroverts, their battery is charged with the people time. I'm an ambivert, straight down the middle. The
Hello, welcome.
Myers-Briggs told me that was one of the biggest epiphanies of my life. Was like, oh, now I know I'm not bipolar, or some sort of weirdo. Like, I love people, but then I have to walk away. But there's also shyness, and over again, I hear people say, well, I'm an introvert, or I'm shy. They're different. Shyness you can overcome. It's just a matter of strengthening your social muscles and confidence.
Mhm.
Introversion that's just how you are. That's how your alone time is, where your battery is going to be recharged. You have to monitor your energy levels. But over and over again, people use different excuses from their social personalities on how they are. Like, this is just me. This is my authentic, or when people are blunt, or when people are, um, I don't know. Bluntness is one thing. Sometimes meanness. Oh, this is just me. I don't sugarcoat things. What I try to hopefully gently tell people, sometimes directly, is that these are all things that we can work on. And I think that's why the energy of my work is so interesting and endless to me, because we all have so much work to do in this area. And
Always.
do a little bit here, do a little bit here, and pretty soon the entire it's just so much like your work. Let's move this around, let's soften this corner, let's change the color of the room, let's soften this light from the north or from the south that's pouring in and making this room like a hot box. Let's fix that. It's kind of like your
Yeah.
work, where we make tweaks.
Well, and again, for me with my work, it's the house is in communication with you.
Mhm.
And the way that the this everything is set up, again with feng shui, it's based on what direction is your house facing, and that's one layer. And then you take a space and you divide it into the 9 equal sections,
Mhm.
and each of them correspond with a different aspect of life. So I look at that as the template, as the Rosetta Stone, if you will,
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
what is your home trying to communicate to you, because at some level there's you got to make sense of, well, why does clutter accumulate in this place rather than this
Mhm.
other place?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's as simple as that's the first spot when you first walk in the
Right.
door,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's not. It
Mhm.
sometimes it gravitates someplace else. So for example, one of the reasons that actually got me really fascinated about studying this was, again, talking about the perception and communication and the curiosity, is I noticed that I would have clutter accumulating usually in the east part of my house.
Mm.
So the east part, and again, I went back and I even looked at the other house that we lived at when we lived in Frisco, and it was the same direction, and I
Wow.
was so perplexed.
Mhm.
The east sector corresponds with the family and ancestors. So
Mm.
your family of origin, the country that the nationality that you came from, the history. It could be like maybe if like in some business setting, who were the managers before? What
Oh.
the grant. Why did this certain company start a certain way? Um,
Mhm.
how many people, how many buyouts happened, and so what kind of baggage is from there? For me, one of the patterns that I have spent my lifetime breaking is all of the stories of lack of women being subservient, of
Mm.
being quiet, of just you're only allowed to
Yeah.
make little teeny tiny waves instead of
Yep.
the great big transformations
Mhm.
that I do.
Yeah.
Um, so many
It's
other things
fascinating,
too, but
isn't it? I
it
mean,
is.
and it's a lifelong journey to walk through this and to recognize that in yourself. It's like,
Mhm,
where is this coming from? I have my own stuff that I think, where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? Is this coming from what just happened? Or is this something that's 3 generations back that's still bubbling up
mhm,
through me? Is it something that, like right now, my office is in the space where my ex husband had his office when he lived here. And I have to
mm.
clean this space out very regularly. And I'm almost there. I've done a lot of good. I tell you what, this has been a very productive space when he was here. He was really getting started in his business, and it's been a really productive space for me. But you know what? It's always been a messy space. And that's one of my projects this week is and I even started writing down the question, do I love this? Does it remind me of who I am? Does it support my work up ahead? Can I use it in the future? And if so, how? I mean, why? And then my other question was going to be, why is this object even in this room? How did this
An
fit back here?
exercise I'll say, there's another exercise that actually just this morning I was talking with a client. Visualize yourself 10 years in the future.
Ah,
Is
okay. I'm writing
this
that down.
going to support 10-year
Yeah.
future Patty?
Yeah.
Or is this something that 5-year past Patty felt was important?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
it
And here's
is.
another one. Will my son want this? I mean, I'm not that old, for crying out loud. I plan on being around for a long time, but I don't want to be the person that leaves behind for my only child and his wife a bunch of junk and things that are really important to me that are just, or maybe I think they're important to me and they will have no meaning to him. Maybe, I don't know. There are certain things where he has told me, Mom, I will want that. Someday I'll want that. Or I want to be reminded of all the things you did. So, but it's interesting. And we take that with our conversations too. We bring all kinds of junk from previous marriages, from previous jobs, from our ancestors, whatever. And I think it's really important. And I'm the first one to be, telling myself to practice this. When we open our mouths, is what's coming out making life better for somebody or worse, including
And is it your
ourselves?
voice or is it your parents' voice?
Oh,
I can't tell you
hmm
how many times that
hmm
I think one of the best, um, personal development, experiences is when, you have kids and you suddenly find yourself saying the same things to them that your parents said to you, and it's like,
Yes.
"What? Where
What?
tape? I
Yeah,
didn't know I had this tape,
yeah,
and I didn't know that you knew
yeah.
how to push the play button."
I got a birthday card from one of my older sisters one year, and it said, "1 year older, 1 year closer to sounding just like mom." Well, and sometimes our kids, you talk about being a mom, sometimes our kids are very perceptive. One time, I think my son was probably in maybe a sophomore in high school, and I was ranting and raving at him about something, and he stopped what he was doing. I think he was literally on a video game, which was just, spending way too much time doing that for him. But, he looked back at me and said, Mom, what you're talking to me about, it isn't, you're not even mad about that. And I was like, wow. I was both taken aback and a little ticked off that how dare you say that? But I was
I
kind
wanna
of
be
like,
mad. Let me
wow.
be mad at what I wanna be mad at.
Yeah, let me be mad. Just don't ruin my mad right now. But I was
Yeah,
really impressed that, like, sweetie, that is so perceptive. Wow. I thought that was really, and then I had to start thinking about, well, what is it about then? So I had to check myself and go back. But I mean, I think sometimes we can
yeah,
do, sometimes it's a risky move, but sometimes when we're in a conversation and we're, and it depends on our relationship. You can't necessarily do this with someone new, or maybe you can, or with, someone you kind of know a little way, a little bit, and then someone you know really well. When you catch them like on a this negative role, to say, okay, time out. What's going on? Are you? I mean, is all your everything you're saying? Is this about this, or is there something else that maybe? Do you need me to just? Do we need to pour a glass of wine and I'm just going to sit here and listen to what's going on, or is this something you actually take pleasure It's this isn't the conversation I was hoping we would have. I had to do that with one of my sisters once. We were on the phone and she was going on and on about the flooding. It was springtime and all the flooding. She lives in Minneapolis, and the flooding that was coming down from the Dakotas as the snow was melting and blah, blah, blah. And she was talking about, and I said, I didn't call you to talk about that. I can go on the news and hear about that. I want to hear how you are. What's going on? I mean, how are the kids? How's John doing? So sometimes we can we have to do it carefully, but sometimes we can intervene and change a conversation and get people out of their negativity bias or whatever it is that's going on. And then we have to sometimes catch ourselves too and go, you know what? I just said 3 complaining full things and I'm sorry. And let's rewind and tell me about how your day's going. I've been kicked off the
right.
podium here. Let's catch ourselves. Let's be aware. The awareness
Yeah.
is the best skill of all. That's the first skill I try to teach people, is let's start being aware of how we are.
And very good points. So let me kind of circle back a little bit to some of the questions that I do like to ask for all of my my guests. Talking about that awareness. When you are, you talked about, the sensitivity and the I'd
Mm.
like to know, curiosity wise, where does curiosity live in your body, or does it live outside of your
Mm.
body? How
That
do
was
you
a
know what to
great
pursue?
question. That was a great question. I think for me, I'm trying to imagine, like, say, being on a hike. That was the first thing being on a hike and seeing a plant or an animal or a track or a rock formation. I mean, I literally, Beverly, I walk around the world just going, wow. You'd think I'd be like smoking dope all the time or something, which I don't. I don't need any of that. I am really, where does that come from? And I think, honestly, I think it comes from down in my solar plexus or stomach, and it just, oh my gosh, and it just comes up and out of my mouth. Like, wow. I get, I'm reading a book or something on an airplane and I'm nudging my sweetie who's reading his own books, like, you got to hear this. This is so, I just get so excited. And interestingly, there's a whole chapter of it on my book. Curiosity is one of the 4 C's. In fact, I
Oh,
think if people go to my website, I think yeah, that is the chapter. It's the free chapter available on my website,
how convenient.
intentionalnetworker.com. And you didn't even know that, did you?
I did not.
Curiosity. Let's see, what are the 4 C's? See if we can remember them. Caring, curiosity, courage,
Have to write this
and
down.
gosh, Patty, what's the 4th C? It's been a while since I finished the book.
Hey, I
There's
was
a
gonna say
4th
you
one.
slept.
I'll leave that as a mystery. But we have to care about people. We have to be curious and ask them questions. I mean, obviously you're curious because you have a podcast. Isn't that the ultimate
Exactly.
media for curiosity? And then courageous. Yes, this might be a bad conversation, but you can walk away. You have the freedom to
Mhm.
walk away. So, yeah,
And
so it
you
comes up
have
through this. Is that normal? Is that
right.
weird? Is that,
No, it's just everybody has their own way of like of that. For me, the curiosity tends to be, it's almost like there's a zipper that opens up,
oh.
and the whole
Mm.
body just kind of like comes forward, and I just envelop it. Um,
Oh.
but I love that, how you're talking about going out for a hike, and whenever I'm out in nature or even just walking down the street, I will
Mhm.
spot some interesting architectural piece or the way that I love looking at clouds.
I do too.
I can make up stories about the cloud
Oh,
shapes. It's fun.
we call them cloud shows. We sit out on our back deck, we watch the sun go down, we have a glass of wine, watch the clouds. But we can be at the gym and you know, a friend of ours who runs casinos out in Reno, Nevada, and has seen everything. You name the type of person, he's seen it. His line that I am trying to adopt is people are endlessly entertaining. And they really are.
Are. They
We are
really
the most
are.
diverse and bizarre species. I mean, so we'll go to the gym, and after we're finished at the gym, we'll go to lunch, grab a sandwich somewhere, and we'll talk about, oh, did you see? And we have nicknames for some of these. And we're not trying to, I mean, we would never say these things in front of, but it's just our way of acknowledging the beautiful variety of life. And there is so much on this planet that is so amazing. I see deer out
Absolutely.
front. I see armadillos. People say, "Oh, possums, armadillos are ugly. You should get rid of them." I think they're adorable. I love them. Make holes in my yard, eat all the bugs so I don't have to put more chemicals on my lawn. But
I was gonna say, do not be mean to possums. They eat
no,
the
the
ticks.
ticks. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just a wildly curious person.
Do you
Um,
like that? Was curiosity something that was allowed you to have it as a child? Was
oh
it
yeah.
rewarded? I mean, as the
Oh,
youngest,
well,
for me,
I would
yeah.
say one of my first memories is my mother's sewing. I'm a toddler or just crawling, and I grab a pin or a needle that I have found on the ground, which in itself was dangerous, and I was about to stick it in the electrical socket, and the hand came down and boop, knocked that out of I and that was that's and it's I don't have any that's just not a bad memory. That's just a memory of me trying to do something that was probably stupid. But my parents knew I was creative. I got to draw when my sisters were all at school and I was still at home with mom. She's trying to clean the house, and I had my little drawing station where I just love to draw. I love listening to music. When I met my first friend Gina, who I talk about all the time. I just put a little picture of us together on my bulletin board today from when we were like 5 years old.
Oh,
We were both we we were and still are very creative people, and we used to come up with so many ways to play. We'd make up games, we'd put on a show, we'd pretend we were the Beatles, whatever. We came up with we'd start with a game that was a regular game and turn it into another game, and it's just who we are. It's just who we've always been, and when we see each other, it's like we were never apart. So my parents encouraged that because we stayed out of mom's hair.
yeah.
If you could stay out of your mom's hair and not bother mom while she's trying to cook and clean and do all the things that a busy mom does, um, she's all right with that as long as you're not getting in. Like, don't run in traffic. That's a big one. Don't, stay safe. But they
I grew up
encourage.
on a pig. Yeah, the farm I grew up on, we had pigs, and
Oh
so,
my! Don't fall in the pig
yeah.
trough.
Well, funny enough that you say that, that was actually apparently one of the things that happened once. I was probably about 2 and I managed, my siblings were supposed to be watching me, and I toddled out of the house, and, we had baby pigs.
Oh.
And this was before we apparently had built the farrowing house, which is, it sounds like a terrible thing, but it actually protected the babies.
Mhm.
It kept the mother more confined for not a
Mhm.
long time, maybe a month at the most,
Mhm.
just until the baby pigs could get their feet under them
Yeah.
and move out of the way.
Yeah.
But before that, they were just in the yard or in their pen, and I crawled underneath the electric fence,
Wow.
and they found me out there pulling the little tails on the pigs
Yeah.
because you pull them and you let them
They go
go and they
boing.
curl back up again. It's like, so I was out there. They found me because I was just laughing my head off.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, in the
Little
grand
kids are
scheme of things,
curious.
that could have been very dangerous because
Mm.
these mother pigs are large. They're usually
Mhm.
about, 600 pounds or
Oh,
more.
yeah. Yeah.
And they were just like, eh,
Oh,
same thing as
wow.
like, you're keeping the baby out of my feet.
Wow.
Whatever. Play with the
That's
tail.
but see, now I know that because you've told me that when you pull on a pig's tail, it springs back. See, I just
Yes.
always imagined that sort of a cartoon type thing, but that's a real see, I know a new fact now.
See, it's
I
a
love
real
that.
thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wish I could hold all more of the facts more readily available. Like I'm sure I am forgetting things, but it's more like it's a Rolodex up here that has to keep turning over until the information. Like if there's someone's name I don't remember, I will eventually remember. It might be 3 hours later, but I just wish
Yes,
it was more readily
I
available.
am I wish I could say that I could remember 3 hours later, sometimes it just doesn't happen,
And no,
and I
yeah,
just say, "Ah,
yeah,
well, you know,
yeah.
I don't forget faces,
I
and I
don't
usually can remember
either.
the context, but
Mhm,
so you had alluded to, a career change,
mhm,
that you are, you went to all there's all this writing, and now you've got this book, and now suddenly you're on the speaking circuit. Um, you know,
mhm,
you're, and it sounds like you're in a new relationship, which usually entails more travel.
mhm.
What's next for Patty DeNucci?
What's next for Patty? So this year in 2024, I really want to do, I still enjoy speaking. And, if they're going to pay my fee, I will show up. But I also want to do more consulting, which is something I can do more locally. I don't have to get on a plane. And I'm getting more interest in people saying, come and teach our client facing employees. A lot of them are younger, but I will also say sometimes older people have issues too. They need a little reminders and refreshers on take the client. Why do we have to teach people how to take the client to lunch? For me, that was like, give me a credit card. I'm there. I will totally handle this for you. But that's how I grew up. And that's a whole another story for another day. But I want to do more active work consulting and helping companies, organizations, conferences, and all that. Way down the road, like in 10 years, I'm also an artist and I started getting back into watercolors and I'm learning some new media. Like, I don't know if you've ever worked with a jelly plate. They are just the coolest thing. It's a soft plastic plate that you put paint on, and then you can do textures with different objects, with plants, with Q-tips. You can write with Q-tips. You can press stencils into them, and then you put paper on it and pull the paper up, and you kind of know what you're gonna get, but you don't really. And again, there's that curiosity of, ooh, what's this going to do? It's a it's a playpen. It's a playpen for art. So I know that later down the line, I want to be doing more art, and if that becomes a profession, excellent. I don't think I'll ever stop teaching people about the connection and conversation piece because it's just so vital to our happiness and our health and our
Mhm.
success.
Yeah.
It's just so important. The more I do it, the more I love it.
I think you were spot on though with targeting the fact that more younger people
Mhm.
need help in the face-to-face
Mhm.
communication
Mhm.
because so much of their existence, of their
Yeah.
formative years, was text. And
Yeah.
how can you communicate with the fewest letters? I mean, and now entire conversations are had via emoji.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
you can only make so many faces in person before they
Yeah.
start to,
And it's
ask if you've
so
had your medication.
and it's so easy to misread what's been said.
Yeah.
We're missing. The part about like you and I right now, I think virtual has been great. I fought it at first. I thought I'm not doing virtual. Now I love it because it's convenient. It's better than nothing. It's the next
Mhm.
best thing to being together. But when we're actually together in a room with whether it's a group of people or one on one, we're seeing each other in three dimension. We're seeing more micro expressions. We're seeing things outside the frame, like what's going on. There's just so much of life that I think technology is robbing us of. And in fact, I'm going to be speaking at the Project Management Institute's spring professional development. I'm the closing keynote speaker after they've spent the day learning about AI. And I'm going to bring them back to the fact that, okay, AI is not a replacement for human interaction, it's a convenience, it's a tool. And we
Mhm.
still, hopefully, it'll give us more time to have true interaction, which you cannot replace.
You can't. In
Mhm,
fact, my daughter's in the process of, writing her application for her residency. She's a veterinarian and is becoming
Oh.
working on becoming a board certified surgeon. And that requires internships and residencies,
Mhm,
and matching with other programs, just like people medicine. And they
mhm,
specifically said you cannot use any AI generated
mm,
text. We
mhm.
know, we will check. So she's having to use her brain. It's a very good brain. It's a
Yeah,
great
I mean,
brain.
Veterinarians, I mean, I tell you what, I had a beautiful golden doodle for 15 and a half years who was my sidekick and my best little friend, and she was the most intuitive, wise dog that was with me through all kinds of stuff, and I'll tell you what, our veterinarian was there at the beginning, and she was there with me at the end when I had to make
Mhm.
big decisions, and those I mean, they're like any doctor, but, I mean, as far they're taking care of our best little friends, and so I have every big respect for veterinarians because they every day they go through the joy of the animals and then the agony of their illnesses, and then they're there with them at the end.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
amazing.
she
That's
just
so cool.
yeah, she just loves, again, talking about the problem solving and the communication skills. I mean,
Mhm.
hopefully she's got the problem solving skills, that she's got a very good brain, and she also does have great communication skills, but she
Abs
loves the precision of surgery.
Mhm.
So, well,
Oh, it's
Patty, I
amazing.
usually try to cap these around an hour, and we are at time. I mean, again,
Imagine
time
that.
flies. Well,
That's a
thank
good
you
sign.
so much. I will put a link to your books in the show notes, to your website, and I'm sure they can get to your speakers page from
Mhm.
there.
Yep.
In addition, I will have my links to my programs in the show notes as well. And thank you so much for your time and for being so
Oh,
generous. I really appreciate it. And
what
Patty,
what a
yes,
great treat. I mean, you and I have gotten to know each other a lot more this year, and I think this is just one more conversation that just keeps that relationship going, and hopefully we've shared some things that were interesting and fun and useful for the
yes,
many people who will listen.
and absolutely. And I would love to talk to you more about collaborating in the future, with you teaching people how to speak to each other and me teaching people how their space is communicating.
Let's do it. I'm in. All
All right.
right.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And I will chat with the next person. Thanks again for everybody joining in, and join me in a couple weeks for the next episode of The Curiosity Solution.